Hi everyone. So today we are going to be doing a Q&A. I do these multiple times a month. You already know this. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. If you're watching this on a replay and you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I will go ahead and turn that off because I think the mic is picking it up. So if you are joining me live, like I said, put your questions in the comments. And if you're watching this on the replay and you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments. I will jump right in today. We are not going to waste a lot of time and just go right into the Q&A. All right. Please let me know if you can see me, if you can hear me, and please do say hi in the comments. Hi, Zach. Thank you for joining me. Hi. Hi, Carlos. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me. All right. So, as you are joining, please feel free to say hi, tell me where you're joining me from, and ask me questions, okay? The the only thing that we are here to do today is for you to ask me questions. So please go ahead and do that. If you are joining me on Instagram, I think the video is kind of a little messed up, so I'm going to try to, while here, try to join on Instagram as well so that I can see you all. Now, if you have questions, oh, thank you so much. Thank you for joining and thank you for liking the podcast. Um, it's such a labor of love, and I'm so glad that you all find it helpful. Okay. So I am going to jump into the questions because I did receive questions ahead of time. And like I said, if you have questions, I just you are joining me live, please do ask. There's a lot of things that has happened recently, especially with the travel ban that I know I got a lot of questions on, and also the termination of the parole program. So those are a lot of things happening right now. So if you have questions about those, please go ahead and put them in the comments. All right. So the first question I got was, if you are in the US under the parole program for Haiti, and that you just received a letter saying that your parole has been terminated, what happens? So once your parole is terminated, your work authorization is no longer valid. However, if you are already in the middle of a marriage-based green card application, you have a legal entry into the US. So your parole is still a legal entry into the US so that your US citizen spouse can still file for you to get your adjustment of status done in the US. So that is really important to know that right, although it's scary and there's so much going on, that process is still ongoing. People are still getting their green card through that process. So just know that as you are going through your own immigration journey, if you are receiving that letter, but you already have your green card application in progress, your green card application is still going to be processed, okay? The ending of the parole just ends your legal stay in the US. It does not that it revokes your legal entry, because all you need to adjust your status in the US based on an immediate relative that's a US citizen is having that legal entry into the US. Okay. So, and I do see questions coming in. Give me one. All right. So first question, hi, thanks for joining me, is I'm applying for CRBA for my young son in the UK. The only physical presence document I have is my 2 expired passport. Will this suffice? Well, your passport shows your entry and exit from the US, right? So that can be helpful. However, if you have, if you have filed tax returns, that will be more helpful. Okay. You don't want to be in a situation where the officer is asking for more documentation. Okay. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to basically have everything ready to go for your CRBA so that when you do go ahead and file and you're in that process, that USCIS is not then turning around and saying, right, I'm sorry, the embassy is not turning around and saying that you are not, right, that you are not qualified. So you want to make sure that, yes, your passport, your entry and exit, but try to find something else to back it up. Okay. So for the CRBA, they cannot assume that just because your passport says you've been in and out of the US on those dates, that you then, for example, go to Canada where your passport may not have been stamped, or that you then go to Mexico where your passport may not have been stamped. So it's really important that you have something else. And for the most part, that something else is typically work records, medical records. Like if you went to the hospital, you can get those records because you have to physically be in the US to have went to the hospital in the US. So those type of records may not be the first things that come to your mind when you think about the CRBA, but just know they are helpful in USCIS embassy. I keep saying USCIS, but the embassy will accept those. Okay. Tax returns. If you do not have copies of your tax returns, reach out to the IRS. They can typically get you your tax transcripts. Even if you need to go back several years, several decades, make sure that you go to the IRS. Typically, they have like an actual office that you go into in major cities. So see which IRS office is closest to you and make an appointment, go in, and typically they can print those out for you and you can leave there with those documentation. So with the CRBA, physical presence is really key, and they want documentation for those physical presence. All right. Next question. Immigration proceedings are the same when you are cash and release in Laredo, Texas. It depends, right? It depends on what you mean by cash and release. Um, if by cash and release, because there's two types, okay? There's two types. So if you encounter immigration and they process you, then let you go, they typically will put you in removal proceedings as part of that letting you go. And you would need to go through that removal proceedings process. So that removal proceedings may take place in the immigration court in Texas, or if you move out of Texas, you can ask for it to be moved where you are. But that process, that immigration proceedings are typically going to be the same everywhere. The judge may make different decisions depending on how they feel about the case. However, the process itself is typically the same. Now, if the person has been in the US for less than 2 years before they were encountered by ICE, just know that ICE is now doing a new trick. All this administration, it feels like there's new tricks and, that they're using to try to get people out. Like I said before, ICE does not have the budget to go and look for every single person that's in the US that's undocumented. However, if you are in removal proceedings, they have access to you because they can schedule you for a court hearing. And what they have been doing is when they figure that someone can be subject to expedited removal, but that person is in regular court proceedings, guess what they do? They will go to court. They will ask for the court to dismiss the case, that the government doesn't want to prosecute this person anymore. The government does not want to, move forward with the court proceedings anymore against this person. The court dismisses the case and the person walks out of court and they get detained by ICE because now that the person is no longer in immigration court proceedings, they are still subject to expedited removal. That's why it's so important that if you are in immigration court proceedings and you think you may be subject to expedited removal, you are consulting with a um, immigration defense attorney. I have to differentiate because people are so, sometimes people don't understand the difference. So I have to differentiate. Immigration defense attorneys is what you want when you are in immigration court proceedings. I do family-based immigration. No longer, in my office, we no longer do removal defense. And I can tell you that it makes a difference if you have an attorney for your removal defense case, okay? But also 90% of people are in removal defense, actually more than 90% are now represented by attorneys. So ICE knows this. So they go to court, they ask for that case to be dismissed. And then once the case is dismissed, they're like, oh, expedited removal. Let's try and get this person out of the US. So just be very careful if you have a case coming up. Make sure you're consulting with an immigration attorney before you get there, okay? All right, next. So my wife, whom I applied for I-130 and an I-485, I applied for it in March. Can she continue working, and is she deportable? So if the work permit is under, okay, let me give a little context. I believe you're talking about if they see a termination letter for their parole, right? If she already received a letter from USCIS saying parole has been terminated, then the work permit that they received under that parole is also terminated. Now, if they have their work permit under the green card application, that permit that's under the green card application is still valid. It has nothing to do with the parole. Okay, it has nothing to do with the parole. You can keep working with that work permit that is under the green card application. Now, is she deportable? Yes, right? Because her valid stay in the US, her status has been terminated. She is technically subject to deportation. And because also you have this process already going, she may be in a less likely position to be detained or to be deported, okay? So typically, I still look to see what has been done. Has the person taken steps to gain status? And if you came in one of those parole and you never took any steps at all to gain status in the US, you are more likely to be subject to removal after that termination is done, okay? Let me show you the multiple place. Did the embassy of the partial restricted countries will still proceed visas? So with the travel ban, is the partial restrictions, can they still process visas? Yes, they will still process visas. However, they are going to limit certain types of visas. So the B1, B2, the F, M, and J, which are the student-specific visas, those ones are going to be more restricted. So they may reduce the amount of appointments they make for those. They may increase their scrutiny of those applications. And if the person, for example, already has a B1, B2 visa and they're entering the US, instead of maybe giving them 6 months of stay, they may only get like a month or a couple weeks. So that's really what that restriction is going to do, is limit the amount of visas that they are given out, the amount of interview spots that they are given to these types of visas, and also limit the amount of time that they are given on the visa. So some visas are valid for 5 years, meaning you can travel. Okay, meaning that you can travel in and out of the US for that 5 years on that visa. However, with this new policy, they may just restrict that to only, that one visit where you're saying you're only coming to the US for this specific purpose, and they will just give you a visa for that time frame that you asked for. But will they still process? Yes, it's just going to take forever. But yes, they will still process visa applications. Oh, Victor, thank you so much for asking. So I never actually turned on the super chats, even though I could. I never turned it on because I didn't feel comfortable doing that. But if you all are okay, I can turn it on at some point in the future. But right now, it is not turned on my channel. Okay. So that is why. That is why you're not seeing that. But please share the video, like the video. That is really the best way to support me at this time. Okay. Actually, let me see if I can turn that on. If you all are, yeah. All right. And next question. I was fingerprinted and photographed and removed back to Mexico. Okay. So yeah, if you have been fingerprinted and removed back to Mexico, you probably had the expedited removal. And with that, you're not going through immigration court proceedings. Okay. So immigration court proceedings is if you are still physically in the US and you are going in front of an immigration judge. Okay. Those are two separate processes. The Trump administration is really trying hard to remove as many people as they can using the expedited removal process because it gives them all the power. If you have to go through the immigration court proceedings and have to go in front of an immigration judge, you have more rights than if you are subject to expedited removal. So that's why, last year, I think I was my predictions video for what's going to happen with this administration and their mass deportations. One thing I did say was they will try to remove as many people as possible outside of the immigration court system. And with the new data coming out showing that less people are coming into the US through the southern borders, that means that they are not able to then meet their numbers because under the Biden administration and even under Obama administration, one of the ways that they have so much deportations and their numbers were so high is because of the number of people trying to physically come to the US that were being removed through the expedited removal process. So their deportation numbers are high because they were like forcefully removing thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from within the US. It's really the board that they were getting those numbers. And because those numbers are down, right, people coming in, the numbers of people coming in are down. That's going to make it harder for them to hit their numbers. I believe their quota right now is 3,000 a week or 3,000 a day, which is not even, it's not reasonable. They don't have the money for that. But we continue, right? We continue working. Okay, Leek is asking, I think, okay. 2 weeks after interview, should I worry because the officer was so nice, even said in 2 to 3 years, I should want to see, oh, I don't want to see you back here with some charges because I filed a 601. We would think you get a decision the next day, but he said we would hear from him 30 days. Okay. So they are no longer given decisions quickly. Okay. There is a whole process behind the scenes that we are not privy to, but we can see the trends. So when you go to the interview, like let's say last year, you went to your interview, the officer can tell you on the spot, I'm going to recommend your application for approval. And typically within a day or two, a day or two, that is approved and you move on with your life. That is no longer the case, unfortunately. Okay. Just an interview this week where the officer was basically like, uh, you know, they can't even tell you that everything looks good. They can't. So, um, and then once they're done with your interview, they have to send it through like a supervisor, and the supervisor has to review their work and make sure that they agree with the approval. And getting stuff through to the supervisor can take time. Okay, especially if there is a 601 waiver involved. They're going to want to really look at everything. They may send it to their legal department to just make sure everything is good before they move forward. So it's not you, right? It doesn't mean they're not going to approve it. It's just the process that they have to go through now for an officer to approve a case is so much more intensive than it was before. Before, the officer could just recommend it for approval. The supervisor may take a look at it. They may just let it go through. But now there's just so much more restrictions on the officers that it is taking longer to get an approval. Okay. But yes, before it used to take, you know, a day or two and you would know the decision. Okay. Victor Saxon, my sister has been on asylum waitlist for more than 10 years now. Can I file for her as a US citizen siblings? Yes, yes, you can. However, I always have to give this part. Can you file for her because now you're a US citizen? Absolutely. But I'm so sorry to say this. It is going to take about 16, 16 years for a visa to be available. So her being on the asylum wait list not really going to change that waiting time for the visa to be available. So yes, you can file for her, but just know it's going to take a very long time for a visa to be available. And even when a visa is available, if she is not in valid status, she may need a waiver, right? She may need a 601A waiver to then leave the US and apply for the visa to come back. So it's really important that if you do want to file for her, go ahead and do it. Things can change, laws can change, but once you file the application, they have to process the application. So typically, if there's a change in the future, which is one thing that Republicans want to do, is limit family petitions so that there's no sibling petitions anymore, right? Um, so I encourage anyone that wants to file for a sibling to do it now. Don't wait because, listen, you just said she's been here for 10 years. I always ask, how long have you been a citizen? And if you filed it when they first got here, right? How many years would have went by now? So yes, you can file. They need to eventually leave the US to get that visa in 16 years. Again, that's if the asylum is not done yet. Right. Um, I was okay. Carlos was saying I was fingerprinted and photographed and returned to Mexico from Laredo, Texas. Would this consider immigration proceedings? I must know um, how to answer part 4, question 53 of Form I-130. Oh, I do not know the exact question that asks. So you may not have been in proceedings, but you were removed. So that those are two different things. Um, so I will get back to you as I try to pull up the I-130 to see exactly what the question for that is. Um, yeah, so Malik is saying he sure doesn't look like he needs approval. He's an experienced officer, I think. Yeah, so that's no longer that used to be the case where the officers' experience is relied on and they're given, full control over their case. That's no longer the case. Okay. At least that's what I have seen in practice. Is even when the officer is experienced, there is a process that they have to go through. All right. All right. Oh, Ella. Hi. Are your 751 clients getting interviews? Some of them are, not all of them. Some are. But because they take so long, will be honest. Because they take so long, we had some under Biden that were interview were waived, and then we had some that had an interview. I've had one under Trump that interview was waived. So it depends. Honestly, it depends. But they are technically technically still approving without an interview. However, you may it's more likely that you will have an interview for 751. That is now their policy is family-based petitions are going to get interviews. And then the people that don't have an interview is like the outliers. Okay. I used to not have so for example, for fiance people that came in on a fiance visa, they got married within the 90 days, they filed their green card application, right? They did those two things. But they're still being scheduled for interviews, while in previous administrations, they were not scheduled for interviews at all. So what I am seeing is under this administration, those cases that before were not being scheduled for interviews now being scheduled for interviews, especially cases that don't, in my opinion, don't need interviews. Because a fiance visa, for example, you already went through a visa interview to come to the US. You already did all the background checks. They already looked at your relationship to approve the I-129F, and now you're just filing for your green card. Nothing has really changed. Right? You got married within 90 days of being in the US, and now you're filing your case. Nothing has drastically changed other than the fact that you're now married for you to need another interview. But we're seeing those scheduled for interviews as well. Victor, do you escort for in-person interviews? Yes. Depending on where the case is. Yes. For my clients that are within with let me let me repeat that. For clients that their field office is within an hour of my physical office, yes, absolutely. We escort them to their interviews. And then if it's outside of that, it's up to the client if they want to pay for me to be there in person. All right. Ella, thank you so much. I am so glad that you find value in that. Oh, and I am so glad that you get the newsletter. I keep saying that I'm going to be more consistent with the newsletter, but I will start being more consistent with it. And I am so glad that you find it helpful. I do get people that like email me back after I send out the newsletter, just being like, thank you for the information. So it does show that it is helpful. So I'm going to do more of that. All right. Hi, Abba490 on Instagram. Hi. I do not allow video requests. So if you do have a question, just type it in for me and I will respond to that. I am not set up for it yet. Okay. So that's why I don't do it. I am not set up for video requests. So just ask me questions in the comments. And Victor, thank you so much. Thank you. This is I'm glad you put it that way. This is my pro bono hours, even though I do pro bono work with nonprofits where we actually represent clients. But um, with this, I am so glad that I am able to help and answer questions. Again, these are not individual specific questions. That's why I'm able to answer your questions, because they're general questions. Like anyone that's going through an immigration process, like a marriage-based green card application, is going to have similar questions about interviews and things like that. But if you're looking for a more like individualized process where we actually look at your situation and ask answer your specific questions, the best way to do that is by going to my website and scheduling a strategy session or a paid consultation. So I have both of those available on my website. And let me get you the link. So, and the link is on the bottom of the screen. If you are on YouTube or Facebook, the link is on the bottom of your screen. And then if you're on Instagram, it would be in the under my links. Yeah. But the website is lilylegal.com. You click on contact us and you can literally see my schedule and book a time for us to talk. All right. So, Victor, your question. Yes. And second question, are you on TikTok? You are the second person to ask me that this week. Yes, technically, but not as active as I should be on TikTok. But yes, we are also on TikTok. I'm not going live on TikTok yet. So I am going live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. All right. And the TikTok handle, if I can remember, is immigration lawyer Lily, I believe. It is the only handle that's different from everything else. Everything else is Lily Legal, but on TikTok it is a little different. All right. So remember, if you have questions, please put them in the comments. I did receive questions ahead of time. This is why I tell you all to ask me questions in your comments, okay? Ask me questions in the comments so that if I don't get to it, I do answer it on a live. Frederick, please, I prefer to have your number for consultation. You can call the office. Our number is 508 443-1788. And I will go ahead and put that in the comments as well. So feel free to give us a call Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we're not open on weekends or on holidays. But that is the best way to reach out to us if you are not able to use online booking. Okay. So next question I have here is, all right, I submitted an I-130 application for my husband and stepson in 2024, and I'm still waiting on USCIS. I am waiting to pass number 2 on the process, which would be the National Visa Center stage. But my husband wants to see if he can apply for a B2 visa for tourists to come here and wants to know if this is possible to be done. Okay, so this person already filed an I-130 for their spouse. You're waiting for the I-130 to be approved to start the visa application stage. Now the husband wants to apply for a visiting visa to the US. The question is it possible? Maybe, right? The answer is maybe. It may be possible if the husband can show strong ties to their home country. Okay, this is harder to do when you have a US citizen spouse that is already filing for you. right? But is it impossible? No. If you are, the CEO of your company and you have, hundreds of employees and you make millions of dollars and, all this stuff, or you are a high ranking member of a political regime, right? There's certain situations where having a US citizen spouse can be overcome for a non-immigrant visa. However, if you are, let's say, unemployed, or you have a business but it's just you don't have employees, just know USCIS, I keep saying USCIS, just know the embassy is not going to approve your B1, B2 visa when you have a US citizen spouse, unless you have a lot going on for you. That will mean that you'll go back home once that is approved. The whole point of a non-immigrant visa is, will this person go back home if we give them this visa? Do they have things going on for them that will let them, or that will make them want to go back home? And if the officer can't answer that and say, yes, absolutely, that is not being approved. And under the new policy as well, they are really being strict on B1, B2 visas. They are looking at each country, seeing how many, the percentage of people that overstay from each country. And they're making decisions based on that. And I will tell you that part of the reason that some of the countries that are on the partial travel ban list is because of that percentage of people that overstay their visa once they come to the US. So there is going to be more of a crackdown on visa overstays and on people applying for new non-immigrant visas. Okay. Question. My wife submitted marriage application for 3 years now, and they replied that they are working on it, but haven't seen anything. Well, yeah, that is a long time. The question becomes, is your wife a US citizen or a permanent resident? If your wife is a US citizen, then that is long. Okay. That is very long. So I would suggest, having her reach out to her congressperson, doing a service request, doing more, right? Than just waiting. All right. So if they have not approved the I-130, if they have not approved the I-130, you want to know why, and reaching out to USCIS to get more information by the service request, or by reaching out to her congressperson, and this is very specific, it has to be her congressperson, and seeing if they are able to help. We do this for our clients, where we reach out to their congressperson and they will reach out to USCIS. Sometimes they can get the case expedited, or at the very minimum, give us some form of answer as to why the case is taking so long. So there's steps that needs to be taken, especially when you pass that year and a half. Once you're outside of normal processing time, you need to take active steps to see what is going on with your case. You can't just let it go on forever. All right. So if you are in a situation where your spouse is not able to do that, feel free to reach out for a consultation. Let's see if we can work together to get the case moving. All right. Malik, the interview took 10 minutes. The rest was about him telling me to stay out of trouble because you have a wonderful family. That is, listen, when it comes to USCIS interviews, the officers are 90% of the officers, I wouldn't say all of the officers, okay? 90% of the officers are going to be nice to you. They're going to be kind. They're going to do all of those things because guess what? They're human. Okay, and they know that a human is standing in front of them and they basically have your whole future in their hands. So they're going to be kind to you. There are officers that are not as kind, but in my experience, 90% are kind. Kindness does not equal approval. I don't know, kindness does not equal approval. Remember, USCIS officers before this administration was, okay, let's see if you qualify for this thing. and approve it. Now is, let's see if you qualify for this thing and can we find a reason to deny it. So the niceness, there's still processes behind the scenes that they need to go through to see if they can actually approve your case. So for example, we have a asylum interview, we're waiting for a decision, we get a call, oh, the decision is not ready. So now we have to wait. Like, why is the decision not ready yet? When they told us the decision would be ready on this date. So it's not always the officer, it's the process. Remember, this is not, you know, an independent person making a decision. This is an organization and they have processes that the officer has to go through, regardless of their years of experience. All right. Next question. Can someone who is on a fiancé visa and don't want to marry the US citizen anymore the status any other way, like marry someone else or switch to F1 or asylum? All right. So, great question because I got this recently. One, switch to F1, maybe. Switch to asylum, yes, if they qualify for asylum, they can switch to asylum and then eventually get their green card through asylum because asylum does not require you to have an affidavit of support. Now, if they want to adjust through any process that requires them to have an affidavit of support filed, they will not be able to get it. Okay, so that's really key. So for marriage-based cases, can they marry someone else? No. The point of a fiance visa, and this is like strictly for fiance visa cases, the point of it is that you are going to marry this person. And if you have decided not to even marry the person, you need to then leave the US. Or if in this person's situation, if they qualify for asylum, look into that as an option, right? But not, the key is just because you came in with a fiancé visa does not mean you can just marry someone else and get a green card through that other person. Unfortunately, that's how it works, and that is something that people don't realize. It's such it's such a different it's such a different process from everything else that people don't really get the difference there. All right. Okay. So, okay. I am so sorry, guys. I am getting a call from the Boston Asylum office. So I am going to end this live very, very badly in the middle of it. Okay. Bye, everyone. So sorry.